So let me do the official introduction of Solange. So Solange is the executive director of ITPC, which is an advocacy organization that initially was designed to support HIV and AIDS advocacy. They since have really looked at their strategy and defined in this current state and environment how they can really drive and make the most impact. Solange has been a leader in this space for quite some time, has been in this role, Solange, what, for about 7 years? Oh, come off mute. I can't hear you.
Yes. Hello. This is 2016. Yes.
2016. Okay, I was close. Yeah. So about seven years. And one of the reasons that we are super excited that we are having the opportunity to speak with Solange just because she brings such a unique perspective in terms of how she has shaped her leadership in regards to the direction of ITPC and how to keep ITPC not only relevant but impactful in the current environment, and how she does that in regards to empowering and keeping her team energized and also engaging with partners, and what that means and looks like from her experience and her expertise areas. And so we're super excited to have Solange with us today. Our topic, as you all know, is around treating people right. And what does it really mean to treat people right? And kind of moving from that age-old term that we've heard of treat people the way you want to be treated, because actually sometimes we need to be customized and unique, and not everyone has the same experience. So I may need to treat someone in a different way than I may want to be treated, but in a way that I know is really going to be impactful and appropriate for them. And so Solange is going to take us through that, and we're going to kind of navigate this journey over the next hour in talking about this from an individual level, from a team level, and then also from a global perspective, and what does it really mean to treat people right at a global level. So with that, I'm going to stop presenting so folks can see us well. And Solange, I'd love for you to just kick us off by telling us a little bit about who you are and what your story is and what's brought you to the place that you are today, both as a leader and also for the personal values that you hold that have guided you into this leadership role. So just tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Tiffany. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share a bit of my story with you guys. It's funny, you know, I'm so accustomed to preparing for technical webinars. So it's not like I can read my notes to tell me read my story. So I'm just going to speak today, and it will hopefully just be that conversation as Tiffany keeps us all calm and energized at the same time. So I was born in Trinidad and Tobago, which is a tiny island in the Caribbean. If you're looking for it on a map, the name Trinidad and Tobago is actually bigger than the actual island it is over. So it's a funny thing to think about. It's just above Venezuela. My parents were, in very modest means. My mom was a teacher, and my dad was in a labor office, and then kind of grew into labor relations. And I grew up in Trinidad. I was educated in Trinidad, and then never knew what I wanted to do. I don't know if anybody knows about the British education system. You kind of have to get in lane, I don't know, from the womb. You come out and be like, I want to be a lawyer, doctor, engineer kind of vibe. And I genuinely did not know what I wanted to do. And I think now everyone has a bit of an appreciation of public health. It's a little bit more sexy because, you know, you've learned from COVID. But before then, no one did public health. And it was like, what are you going to do? Work for the ministry of whatever country? And it was actually one of my friends who still works for the CDC, who I did an internship, and she talked about what she was studying, and she was studying social epidemiology. And I was like, there's a thing called social epidemiology. What's that thing? And that your health outcomes can be dictated by your social means, like what's happening in your life socially. And I was like, I didn't know that there was a term for that. So that was one of the milestones that shifted me and kind of helped me to get on a path. Before that, I thought I was going to become a doctor. Very cliche. My dad passed away from cancer. I thought I was going to cure cancer. I was the typical pre-med student. I left Trinidad and ended up in Alabama. I was like, where am I? Because the Americanized view of the world is 90210, and then I ended up in what I thought was like the color purple, and I was like, where am I? But Tuskegee University is my alma mater, and I loved going to school there, and that's where I thought I was going to be this doctor that was going to fix everything. And then you realize, and I think it's an important part of trying to figure out, am I a macro thinking person? Do I think in systems, or do I think much more at the individual level? And I think you try both, and then you realize absolutely not. Sometimes that's what you learn, or absolutely yes. And I did a lot of lab research. I cut up, a number of cockroach embryos to figure out something about Alzheimer's disease. I've done every PCR, like I did all the lab things. I'm like, yeah, but no. And then I started to work in JSI, John Snow Incorporated, was one of the first jobs that I had. And I started to work in sort of USAID rules and regs, and making sure that projects were financially okay from the backstopping finance and admin. I could do it, but good Lord, I would go crazy. I was like, there must be more to life. And then I started to see the actual work that the projects were supporting, and then started to be more attracted to that. And, my first taste of public health was from a work perspective, was in Ukraine, in Kiev. So I have quite a lot of friends there. And so that's where the trajectory kind of moved into public health. And I've been working with ITPC since 2008, but from different perspectives. And I've been leading the organization since 2016. Did I just ramble? I have no clue.
That is amazing. No, you did an amazing job sharing that journey and that perspective. And so I'm really curious, Solange, because I think that one of the things that you touched on was this importance of kind of understanding different cultures, right? Because even what you just said around, you were born, raised, educated in Trinidad and Tobago. You then came to the US. You now live in Johannesburg, South Africa. Like, tell us a little bit about how that journey for you from a cultural perspective and learning different cultures has shaped like how you think about the world and how you think about the work that you all do as well in terms of social impact and making the world a better place.
Yeah. I don't know your religious beliefs, but only Jesus is the savior. You know what I mean? Like, don't go thinking you could go save people. Don't assume. You need to invite curiosity. So that's, I think, moving from Trinidad into Alabama. Then I went to school in Boston, which is a whole different, New England is a whole different ballgame compared to the dirty South. And then you move to South Africa. Even the perceptions of race in Trinidad, you're Trinidadian. You're like, look at me. This is how I came out. Like, what am I? I don't have a particular box to tick. And then you move to Alabama, and everybody's like, you are Black. And I'm like, where did you get that from? Who told you that? And then you move to very, New England type of environment, and it's a very different context. And then you look at what race looks like in South Africa. It's a very different context. So it is easy for us to judge ourselves and to easily judge others. And I think the thing that I have learned along the way is to invite curiosity. I wonder why it's what I'm observing, and you could fill in the blank. And I think if you come with that posture into your research, into your public health work, into your interventions, you then offer your opinion after it's been invited. So people then say, well, I'm not here offering a solution to people. I'm actually here trying to understand context and to learn what from them I could be supportive for. I think that's really important, because there's a certain sort of colonial, top-down, arrogant view that the entire public health system has been built on, right? Like the whole idea of doing tropical, what was my degree in something? But if you do tropical medicine, if you do population and international studies, all those were euphemisms for the tropical diseases of brown, poor, developing countries. Let's go study them. And it's a different world now.
Yep. No, that I completely resonate. I completely resonate with that. And to me, that directly connects with the topic of this webinar around treating people right? And what does that actually look like? And how do you do that in a way that you come in with curiosity was one thing I heard you say, with openness, with humility. I heard you say, which is like, I can't necessarily come in and fix this. I don't necessarily know the right answer. And so I'm curious, in your perspective and from your experience, Solange, how do you define like treating people right? Like that term, like how do you define that? And how has your understanding of that evolved over time?
Yeah, I knew you were going to come with this question, some version of it. And I've been in a reflective mode for the past few days because, as I said, I'm not accustomed doing webinars of this nature very often. Not like I don't get a random question, but this is the topic. And I think it has to do, it's impossible for me to separate my spiritual views and who I am at the core from the work that I do. And so for me, it's about seeing God in everyone, like their humanness. You know, you can have opinions about what people do and how they do it and whatever. At the end of the day, we're all human. And I think that to me is the base factor for treating people right. Treating people with respect, with kindness, with empathy, with understanding. And I think over time, you know, you can have a very simplistic view of what I've just said. You're like, oh, you're just kind to everyone. No, it's actually, as you intimated, Tiffany, when you said, you know, what is right? Is it equal? Is it equity? And we know the differences with those things, and what may be right in one context may be wrong in another context, or in a particular moment in time. What is relevant, what is right now for somebody in a particular space may be completely different 2 weeks from now because the context changed. And so again, that whole don't assume that you know, ask, listen, and listen with the intention to understand. Don't listen so that you could find a what do you call that? Like a little window so you could jump in with your great idea. Like genuinely listening to people goes a long way, from leadership with your teams to communities that you may be working with, to even in the macro systems of the world where you try to shift systems. You have to listen to be like, where is this person or this group, or what are they actually, what's the thing behind the thing that they are saying? And that's when you can get better interventions for impact. The intention is also something you should pick up on. Because not everybody is able to articulate what it is they're trying to say. So sometimes you're reading for intention, and then you can maybe meet someone with the words that then puts language over what they actually were trying to say. But again, you only do that if you're listening for understanding.
I really like that, the listening for understanding, because I do think in general, from a leadership perspective, and especially in a global environment, there is this perspective of, I'm listening, but am I actually listening because I'm waiting on you to stop talking so I can bring in my perspective? Or am I listening so that when that opening happens, I'm asking a question of clarification? Is this what I heard you say, right? Tell me a little bit more. Or am I opening it up for a level of curiosity? And I think there's a big difference. I think that if we really pay attention to when we listen, and then what we say in those quiet moments where there's open space, are we bringing in our own perspective, or are we asking for an understanding of what that person said, or offering a question of curiosity? So that is something for me that I'm taking from what you've just shared as an important leadership, you know, capability as we think about what it means to be a global leader. I want to ask you another question, Solange, because as we were prepping for this, one of the things we talked about is the importance of values, right? And you've already spoken a bit about your values, right? You talked about your faith, right? You talked about the importance of coming in with curiosity, the importance of coming into spaces with humility, of actively listening to others. I'm curious for you, when you think about like values driven leadership, right? Like what values you really bring into your leadership, both your leadership from an internal executive director perspective and your leadership externally, right? Like in the world with partners and others that are just looking at you and watching what you're modeling. What does it actually look like when those values are tested, right? In real time situations. I think that we all, as leaders, have experience, and even as not leaders, right, as individual contributors, have experienced times where maybe something that we really hold close, that we value, is tested, whether it's something that's happening in the external environment that we can't control, something that is happening internally in our organizations that maybe we just fundamentally disagree with, right? Maybe it's something that someone has asked us to do or wants us to do in a higher level position, and we're just like, that really goes against my value system, right? And so I'm curious, and from your experience, how do you manage, right, those times where your values are actually tested as a leader? And how do you manage that and really model the type of leader that you want to show up as?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't remember exactly what Mia Motley said, but it was something to the point of, she's the Prime Minister of Barbados, something about like your principles and your values only matter if they're tested, right? That it's only when they're actually tested does it show up. Because I can tell you a whole lot of values, like, you know, if you think about it from a systemic perspective, the world was like multilateralism, we're all here for each other, we joined together, and then COVID hit, and everybody was man for themselves. Everyone was hiding their recipe for the vaccine, they were making backdoor deals, and you think, values are being tested, and you guys are showing up in a crazy way. So that is an important point to note. You could talk values, but values are how you show up when the pressures come, when the crisis has hit. I think one thing is that, you know, I think bravery is important. You need to be brave, and brave looks different for different people, and it also in different contexts, different times. What's brave for me today might be speaking up in a meeting where communities are excluded and perspectives are very skewed into a very biomedical, clinical, academic way. And I need to show up and just not be intimidated by who is in the room. And if this donor wouldn't like what I say, oh goodness, I might get quoted on saying something. And that is being brave on that day. Being brave on that day might be giving a staff member feedback they don't want to hear and not avoiding conflict from me, right? You know, it could be easy when I say treat people right for you to think that treat people right means being soft and you just are kind and you don't do hard things. So having the hard discussion perhaps with a staff member is what being brave looks like on that day. And then also like leading with vulnerability, I think is really important. You can't fake authenticity. You're either real or you're not. And I think people will see through it regardless. And you can talk the talk, but are you walking the walk? And your people will know if you're BSing them. And if you want to work with communities, nothing like communities to put you in your place and be like, you are talking nonsense. Please leave. And so for me, another space where being brave with that vulnerability is like my mom passed away at the end of last year. And it was hard, and being able to talk about my emotions when they came up with my team and not squash them and let this be okay. We are all human. You might need a pause right now. And I say that, you know, I always say that to my team. When it happened to me, I had to do the same. I couldn't be like, no, I'm going to be strong and pretend everything's okay. I wasn't okay for a minute. So I think bravery really is important, and it will look different in different spaces at different times.
No, thank you. Thank you for that, Solange. And I was just taking notes as you were talking, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm always about like three-legged stool. And I was like, oh my gosh, being brave, authenticity, vulnerability, like those were the three things that I heard you share are what allow you when those values are tested, right? When your integrity is tested, like that's how you show up. You show up with bravery, you show up with authenticity, and you show up with vulnerability, right? In order to really like stay steadfast in who you are and not have that, you know, swayed or shaken. One of the things that this brings up for me too, Solange, just in your response to this, and was something that you mentioned to me, you probably don't even remember it, but I wrote it down as a quote.
Oh dear.
Is that people are not going to always make space for you. You have to make space for yourself. And so when you think about this kind of being brave, being authentic, being vulnerable, how do you think about that with the idea of this self-agency? Because that's kind of what I get from that quote, right? Like this self-agency around people may expect something from you. They may expect you to get this certain degree. They may expect you to show up in this way. They may expect you to say this certain thing. And they may not make space for your authentic self, right? For you to be the person that is truly who you are. And that's when you had kind of shared this quote about people are not always going to make that space for you, and you have to make that space for yourself. So I'm curious, as you think about like that quote and the self-agency that quote brings, what do you feel like are important for leaders, especially the folks on this call, to really think about in terms of how do you ensure that you're not overlooked, or how do you ensure that you are creating the space to be authentic when sometimes that space isn't created for you, or you're not in that top leadership role, right? Where you can necessarily make that space for yourself. And so what does that self-agency look like for you? And how would you advise others to think about that?
Yeah, that's a pretty deep question. I don't think you can have or be genuinely like have self-agency or agency if you are still having identity issues. And you need to do the work. Who am I? What's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? What gives me the authority to speak on X, Y, or Z? You know, dealing with all your little inner voice critics and the little demons that pop up to tell you you don't have a space here, or I'm talking about just internally. We haven't reached outside yet. Dealing with yourself and all the things that come up before you open your mouth, before you decide, well, maybe I'll go to that meeting and what will I say? Or someone asks you a question, you have to answer it. Your identity and the authority with which you enter a room, all of those things need to be sorted out on the inside of you. And sometimes it's not going to happen like this. It takes time. It takes practice. You know, I go to a meeting and after it, I reflect. Did I represent my values well? Did I represent my organization well? What could I have done better? This is just me talking to myself while I wring my hands sitting. And I think that kind of questioning around your own identity. Then if you are a little bit comfortable in that your own skin now, then you don't need permission. You're not looking for external validation. You're not looking for someone to offer you the space or to offer you the question. You then just are. You speak. It's like, you know, from a systems perspective, I think of it as like darkness. Like light doesn't need permission to enter that. If you are working with purpose, you just go ahead and you speak and you represent the people that you are supposed to be talking on behalf of, or yourself, or whomever, and you just exist. I don't know how else to put it. I think sometimes we think of you know, everything is not fire and fury, right? Like agency is not like throwing down the chair and be like, I need to speak, or protesting in the street. Sometimes it's quiet diplomacy. Sometimes it's like refusing to move until what you have to say is acknowledged, or repeating yourself, putting your hand up. As you said, if you're not like the highest ranking person, like the ED, sometimes it's just asking a question in a staff call or in a one-to-one with your your supervisor is giving feedback up, how do you manage up? Or asking for feedback for yourself, or taking a step to ask to do that thing that might be what you're scared to do. Yeah, things like that, I think.
And that really connects with me on what you said previously, Solange, in terms of that bravery, right? I'm even hearing that part of this agency is it's stepping into whatever for ourselves feels as an opportunity to be brave, right? And that's, it's all relative in what that looks like and means for us as individuals and how we engage with work. Another thing you said that I wrote down is light doesn't need permission, right, to come into the darkness. Like, that for me really resonated. And like, we can all bring our own light and we don't have to give permission to do that, because light seeps in, right? When it's light outside and you're trying to shut the curtains more and get the blackout curtains, it's like
Yes,
seeping in everywhere. And so I think that for me, that's something that I want to think about more, is like, how do I bring and allow my light to seep in even more, and what that looks like in terms of the agency that I can bring to my work and just to the field of work that I do. So thank you for that, Solange. That's a quote I'm definitely taking with me. So I have a couple more questions for Solange, but as we go through these next couple, please, I see we have a few questions in. Continue to throw your questions in the Q&A, because our last 15 minutes or so we'll shoot off your questions and have a bit of a discussion from the folks on the call. So please continue to add. So Solange, my next question is, I want to move us from kind of, we talked about you as an individual. We've talked about you a little bit in terms of you as a leader, right, within the organization and how you think about leadership. I want to move to this more global perspective, because yes, you are a leader internally and you have done, I think, some really transformative work within ITPC. And I'll have Solange share a little bit more about ITPC as well, because I realized I didn't do that at the beginning. So stay tuned. She'll talk a little more about her organization. And you are a leader in this global health environment. And as we know right now, it's fueled with a lot of divisiveness, right? And what does international development actually look like? How should it be funded and invested in? Where are we spending money for different countries to support different economies? And so I'm curious, from your perspective as a global leader, in this world that feels to me very divisive for a lot of different reasons, how can we stay connected, right, to the lived experiences of others? And so when we talk about treating others right, and we talk about, thinking about folks who have different experiences, who've grown up in different geographies, who have different identities, like, how do we think about staying connected to that and actually being able to make decisions and engage and have conversations and what I like to call meet in the middle, which is a lot of the work we do, with this like divisive world that's around us? How have you navigated through that in your role?
Yeah, so maybe for just about ITPC in terms of answering how I deal with it in my world. So ITPC is working on health and social justice, I think is how I would put it now. That's our mission, through robust community engagement. So really, you could work on health and social justice anywhere. You could be a consultant and do things and be like, here's how you fix. But we work through communities that are directly affected by a particular issue and ensure that they work to ensure that they have meaningful, robust responses and engagement. So I think the important thing here is I think of community in two ways. So the way to stay connected and the way that our work continues to work is because I think the social bonds in a community are really what allow us to lean on each other and be resilient and bounce back and try something again, based on what the lived experience is. So being connected, being able to pick up the phone to someone in India and use AI because you can't speak Spanish, just to someone in Argentina or Guatemala, and then hear what's happening with the bombs in Kyiv with our other team member, like talking as a community. And so we call ours a global activist network. And so we try to make sure that there are ways to foster these, and these things happen organically. You can't force a network. You can be like, I'm going to build a network. The connections are either there and you do things to build trust, or you do trust things that don't build trust. And those things then grow organically over time. So I think that's how you genuinely stay connected as a community. And then I think of community as, the community that is directly affected, and community leadership and community interventions, and the work that is led by those that are affected, right? So the problem here, as you talk about sort of the tribalism and the polarization, as we try to think about development, is those on one end and those on the other end, and somehow cannot seem to meet. But the people that are directly affected by the consequences of what happens in the halls of Geneva or New York or wherever the power brokering is happening, those people need to have a space. And I think when you elevate communities as experts and elevate community expertise, then you're able to come in the middle, because we know what we're talking about. We are the ones that are experiencing the thing that you are busy making a policy over. And so being able to broker that, I think, is a sweet spot for community expertise.
No, I love that. And it actually reminds me a little bit of a model that we have talked to several of our clients around, which is adaptive leadership. And especially in the space that we are right now, just around the world, the importance of leaders, global leaders, really being able to be adaptive to change. And one of the pieces around adaptive leadership, which aligns to exactly what you just mentioned, is listen to non-traditional voices. Listen to the people that you wouldn't necessarily bring into the room, because those are the people who are the ones who are going to be the dissenters, who are going to say the things like, yeah, that might not work because of X, Y, and Z. Those are going to be the ones who are the quiet innovators, who are like, actually, I already have a plan for what this could look like because I'm experiencing this, right? And it's bringing people who actually know the culture, and whether that's internally or externally in terms of the partnership work, that's the way to think about being able to lead effectively in adaptive societies, right? It's, you have to bring in those voices that are not the voices of oh, I have the highest degree and oh, I have the most experience. It's about the people who actually have the culture and the understanding and the on the ground learning and experience that can, bring these things in. So that's super, super helpful. So I'm going to go into my last kind of formal question here, which is, and I have one last question at the very end. So but this one is my last formal question before I have my last question after we open it up to folks. Is, when systems or spaces feel intimidating or closed off to you, what practices have helped you and those you work with step in with more confidence and purpose? So what have you actually done, or what have you advised folks on your team to do when they're in a system or space that feels intimidating or closed off, and they are one of those non-traditional voices, right, that are coming into the room?
Yeah, I think the first thing you need to do is name the thing. If you don't name it, it has power over you, I think. So if you feel intimidated, talk to yourself, what's going on? Because if you go and pretend that that is not what is happening, you're going to fumble and you're not going to be effective in the room or in the space. So name the thing and then confront the thing and deal with the thing, right? You could see that work in any aspect of your life. Then do the work. You need to do the work, prepare. So even if it's as I was saying, I'm accustomed to other kinds of webinars, Tiffany. I still had to prepare, and that preparation just looked different. It was a more of a reflective preparation. What is my story? Where did I come from? How do I lead? But do the work. The point is, you cannot show up unprepared and expect to be effective. And laziness is just not going to get you anywhere in this world. So name it, confront it, deal with it, and then do the work so that you are prepared, and then go in the room and do what you need to do. And the way I think of it is, for me, I do all things as unto God, right? Meaning that you cannot wait for external validation for you to feel okay with yourself. So whatever is that inner grounding that you have, whenever you say, okay, I'm done, did I do that? How do I know that I've succeeded? What does success look like after this webinar? Is it that a trillion people came to the webinar, or is it that I feel like I've represented my values well and that we had a good conversation? Whatever it is, you should know that from the beginning. And I mean, that helps you to kind of see where you're going in the process. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you did, because what I heard, Solange, is one of the things around this piece is first really sitting with what is it that is creating, right, this intimidation or having me feel as if this space is closed off. And then that other piece that for me stuck out from what you shared is being able to be really clear around, if I'm going to step into the space, what do I want to get out of it? Like, what does that success, how am I measuring that for me? And I think that's another piece that I'm hearing as a consistent thread, Solange, and what you're sharing is the treating people right and how we step into that as leaders and as individual contributors in the work that we do is very much aligned to who we are as a unique individual, and is very much relative to like how we show up, right? And so being brave, right, or having vulnerability, or being authentic, or, you know, my measure of success of doing something that seems like really hard for me to do may be very different than someone else's. But really spending the time to sit with that and being okay with what is it that I actually want to get out of this, and being thoughtful and intentional about that is that thing that really helps us show up effectively and then be able to treat others, it sounds like, more effectively as well. So that was kind of some of the threads that I took from what you shared. So what I'd love to do now is open it up for some questions from our participants. So if you haven't dropped a question in, please do, because I think there are no silly questions. All of these I think will be helpful for those on the call. So I'm going to kick it off, Solange. We have one question in here that is asking, says, I want to ask Solange how treating people right have helped her to be who she is now. And they want to know how they can become part of your organization. So you can share a little bit about both of
those. Sure. How does treating people right? Say that last part.
Sorry, I just closed it. How treating people right has helped you be who you are now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the worst thing is to be like trying to say yes and doing this, right? You need congruency in your life. Things have to line up. And so treating people right is probably just, you know, dressing or words that kind of represent the values of who I am on the inside anyhow. So they both line up. So I didn't have to like put on the treat people right and keep it on to make sure that I show up all the time. And then some days I forget to put it on and I'm not treating people right. It's an alignment with who I am. And I think that's always important when you're looking for a job or for your purpose. Sometimes you're doing a job, but it may not be like your life's purpose. And sometimes that is what it is. You do the work to pay the bills. But whatever is really driving you, there must be alignment with who you are and those values, I think. In terms of how to join ITPC, we're a global activist network. You can join. That is easy from the website. But if you're looking to be employed at ITPC, that's a different conversation. And you can check on our webpage for any employment opportunities, or you can just email me or the team, and we're happy to have a chat.
Perfect. And we can, what we'll do is we'll throw in the chat, maybe Anthea, you can, just the ITPC website. And then if you all want to go to the ITPC website, and you can see more information and see any job opportunities. Solange, we have another one in here, which is not a question, but this participant just wanted to share how amazing you are personally and in all the work you do, and that they feel like you are a gift. So,
sweet.
So that was
very much, very kind.
Very nice comment. Another question is, Solange, what has been kind of your biggest challenge in your leadership journey? So if you had to say, like, this is the biggest challenge you've had as a leader, what has that been, and how have you overcome it? I'm adding the how have you overcome it or moved past it.
Yeah, that's a good
question. If you have it.
Well, you will find out, right? I mean, I will find out even as I speak. Biggest challenge, I think, is doing the internal work. So I could tell you about my business. I could tell you a little bit about my process, but I think the biggest challenge is being comfortable with your dysfunction. That's how I am. This is my personality. This is how I grew up. And then being stuck and not growing. So it's important to do the hard work. When I said before, do the work, it's not just know your statistics and read the articles and be prepared for the thing, but what are my triggers? Why is that person making me messed up? I can't even remember my point. Do the inner work to be able to show up in your best self for, in my context, the communities that I'm representing, right? I cannot go into a room that is made to exclude people like me and then be intimidated, because then I'll be wasting the seat, because I'm scared to open my mouth. Therefore, I have to deal with my inner demons of imposter syndrome. Who made you the person to speak on behalf of communities? You're not even from Africa. What you doing here? You're from Trinidad. Go speak for the Caribbean people. Like, unravel all those troubles in your head. And I think that is the piece of work that's been the most rewarding, because when you overcome that, then you can show up confidently, and people are less interested about what this looks like and more about what you're actually saying. Which can then change the system.
I love that. No, that I think it's so, yeah. I think this whole piece around, it's about how you show up, right? And that can take away a lot of the visual cues that people take from you. And it's more about what is the conversation we need to have. So I love that. Okay, last question I'm going to take is, Solange, tell us a little bit about your work-life balance. So you seem to have a busy job, a lot of things happening. You have a family as well. You also need to have your own personal wellness and time. And so tell us a little bit about how you manage your work-life balance.
Yeah, that ebbs and flows. Some days I'm like, yes, I have got this balance going. And then some days I'm like, whoo. But it is just important to give yourself grace. You're often giving everyone else grace, and you're being empathetic and kind and thinking about others. And then, extend yourself some of that grace. Work-life balance, again, has to do with your values and really sort of doing the prioritizing. Is your family the most important? Then why does it look this way? Is your work most important? Then why does it look this way? And then whatever is the most important, you try to find a way to make your life. It's sort of an architectural, like, I don't want to be extra deep, but like, it's almost like warfare. You have to fight for it. You have to fight for your time in the day. Is my health a priority? Then have I exercised? Is are my children a priority? Yes, but I've farmed out my education to the teachers, but am I farming out their parenting to a nanny? Like, where's the balance for you and your family? And so that's sort of putting the structures in place to fight for what you know is right. So that's sort of warfare by architecture. Build it properly in your life, and then you'll be able to live what you're talking about. And then the work life sort of automates itself without being too legalistic and be like, on Tuesdays at 2, I have to exercise. But, you're finding the space.
Mhm. You're giving me all the quotes, Solange. I love that, warfare by architecture. I'm taking that one too. I like that. Okay, that was going to be the last question, but we have 2 more in. So let's keep it going. We have about 7 more minutes. So we'll do these 2 quickly. So one of our participants is part of the TB community work, and they find that the TB world is where people are treated badly. Words like people-centered are mere words not followed up with actions. What's your advice to deal with this on a daily basis?
That is tough and very true. I'm really sorry that is still since I started this job, we've been trying to integrate HIV and TB is always really suffering with this kind of discrimination. Sometimes that fight looks like changing policies and calling people out, suing them, taking them to court because it's just wrong. Sometimes that looks like correcting someone because they actually don't know the language to say, like, how do you call someone that's had TB, or what's the language, like just language. Sometimes people genuinely don't know, and you could see their intention. So sometimes that is what that could look like to change that. And then it's a constant pressure. Sometimes just holding the line is a win. And you have to keep the pressure on to hold the line. And sometimes you're actually moving the line up. And that takes all hands together to make sure nothing leaks or nothing spills out and everyone is being protected and cared for. So it can look different. I'm really sorry. TB is not that any disease area is better or the other. You're not ranking them, but it is tough because it is a disease of the poor. Predominantly, and it is harder to make that argument in these global systems for funding, for that space to be made. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And then this next question, it's a fun one. So if you could go back and give yourself, your younger self, one piece of leadership advice that you did not believe in before, what would it be?
That is profound. I think it would be just stay true to yourself. Know who made you, because I don't think I belong to myself. I come from, and stay true to your insides.
I love that. You're getting some love, some emoji love there on the emoticons. Okay, so I'm gonna just throw out our last question for you, Solange, in our last 4 minutes. And this is similar to that question, so it would just be honestly any additions. But when you think about this topic of treating people right, the folks we have on this call that are really, interested in how can we really grow and develop to be even more effective leaders in the spaces where we're working in our communities or from a global perspective, what would be your 1 to 2 pieces of advice for the folks on this call that they can write down? And if they didn't leave with anything, they left with like these 2 nuggets, from you.
I would go back to curiosity. I think it's really important for us to understand why. So the thing behind the thing. When you're having, whether it's TB, whether it's NCDs or emergency outbreaks or HIV, what is the reason that there's opposition? What are the arguments? Like, you can't be afraid, and when you want to sit in an echo chamber with people that agree with you, you need to make sure that you go in the space where folks completely disagree. What are the arguments that they're making? about why that cannot be funded. Is the market too small? The volumes won't sell, whatever. Find out what they're saying and then build your counter argument on the thing behind the thing, not the surface. What I'm trying to say there is, like, you know, and I've said this before, like, you're often building, you're going to get more data to deal with something that is an ideological issue. And you're going to come with an argument on cost effectiveness when people are looking for justice. You're going to be using the wrong tool, you know, hitting a hammer for a mosquito. Like, what is the actual problem? And then build your argument. And when I say the actual problem, like root cause, not, well, they said that the system, you know, like it won't be efficient or there isn't enough market, but why? So like normally asking why a few levels down can get you to some of the core systems blocks, that the dark parts of it, like the things that you need to attack and dismantle truly, and then make arguments for that. It's easy to do a Google search and get some data and build an argument. I mean, like, the data shows that when you do this, better health outcomes. Nobody cares. Like, think about the current administration in certain parts of the world to the west of where I'm sitting. More data is not going to change their minds. They have a different ideological position. Understand that. Don't be afraid of it and be complaining about it. Understand it and then see how you can counter it, is what I would suggest.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's amazing. And so I'm leaving with the be curious, actually understand why people think different, to understand their philosophy, their ideology, their values, and use that to be able to engage in conversations to help shift, right, those mindsets and to shift behavior and to bring people along. Well, so with our minute left, Solange, I'd like to use the minute just to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your experiences. It's a gift, I think, to everyone on this call to have an opportunity to hear from leaders and successful leaders and women of color leaders in this environment. So we so appreciate it. For those that are listening, if there are others that you think would benefit from this, please feel free to send them our website. We'll have this posted, and join our newsletter, and you will get information on the next webinar that we have as well. So thank you so much, Solange. Thanks to everyone, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Tiffany, for this platform. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.